Yeah, 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 yeah. Area code 207.
Okay, hey everyone. Welcome back to another interview. I have Jay Wong on the other side of the line with me. Now, Jay is the host of the podcast, The Inner Changemaker. And the tagline of his podcast is choosing legacy over currency. Jay's podcast debuted at #1 in self-help on iTunes, beating some very big names to get there. So first of all, congrats on that, man. Great accomplishment. And he's had some great guests on. He's had Bob Proctor, Jack Robbins, Tucker Max, and we're actually just speaking before we went on live. And very soon he's going to have Grant Cardone on an interview, which I'm looking forward to. I'm a big fan of Grant. So Jay, that's my little intro out of the way, but we want to hear you speaking. We want to hear about your story. So can you tell everyone listening, who is Jay Wong and why did you decide to set up a podcast?
Yeah, well, first of all, David, absolute pleasure to be here. I don't know when you're going to be releasing this, but I did a bit of a pep talk for my audience on my podcast. I don't know if you got a chance to hear it. I just literally released it like 48 hours ago, and I was like, guys, it is Q4. It is Q4. We got less than 90 days for the rest of 2016, and I don't know about you guys, but for me, this past year has been absolutely like mind blowing. It's been amazing, but I'm really trying to level up. Right, we were talking just a little bit off record, before this. We're always in that process of refinement. Right, we're always in that process of what's the bigger vision? How can we drive and create a deeper level of impact? How can we help people get to what that next level it is for them? So for Q4, I kind of made like an intention of having some like powerhouse guests on the show. So Sean Stephenson recently just came on.
Yeah, I love Sean Stephenson.
Like absolutely mind-blowing stuff. Jonathan Fields from Good Life Project.
Oh man, I love him as well. This is great, man.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Literally, look at this. Like, so he just came out with a new book, right? Good Life Project. You guys should definitely check this book out. I went through this whole book, and then we did an interview, which is going to release a couple weeks, probably. I don't know when you're getting this out, but so I'm just like fully intended on just leveling up in my life, right? One of the things that I really believe it's like we all have to play to win rather playing to not lose. And a lot of times it's like a very subtle distinction, right? A lot of times we play to not lose because we're scared of what happens. No, we got a bit of money, we got a bit of notoriety, we got a bit of Instagram love, whatever it is, right? We're scared to lose it. Now going to answer your question, I decided to start. So I started the podcast because in the very beginning, my podcast is about 15 months old, okay? And so we started this last July. It was an amazing launch. It was great. But I remember being at one of these like entrepreneurial dinners, one of these like mastermind dinners. I don't know if you've ever kind of heard of the concept. It's just a gathering of entrepreneurs. Everyone's trying to pick apart everyone's business and in like a, not like a, make fun of you or try to criticize you type of way. But, at that time, I honestly, like, I didn't even know, like, what I was doing. Like, I didn't even know how to, like, introduce myself properly because I didn't know who I was really helping. I just knew that intuitively I had this message inside of me that I wanted to get out to the world. So I was like, well, I know that I could speak. I know I can make videos on this. So that's what I was doing. I was, like, on, like, YouTube. I was, like, doing speaking engagements for, like, high schools, universities for, like, a few $100s. And it felt like my energy was just everywhere, right? Because you're seeing like, oh, I saw Brendan Burchard do this one thing. I got to copy that, Oh, I see Gary Vee. He's doing this one thing. I got to do that too, right? And the thing is, I remember someone brought up, they were like, Jay, we think it's really awesome. You're ambitious, great energy, whatever, all this nice stuff. They're like, do you find like there's no like real hub for your content? Because it's like, it kind of spurred the moment, right? Like you're inspired to do it, so you do it, right? And I was like, yeah, I guess there's no real like schedule. There's nothing. Like I don't really know what the message is, but I knew enough. Like some of the stuff that you see on the podcast, like legacy over currency, impact, right? I knew kind of like I wanted to kind of go in that direction. And so a lot of them recommended podcasting. They're like, "Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast?" And I was like, "You could wait, you could do that?" Like I was like, I didn't. I was like, I thought you had to be James Altucher or Tim
Yeah.
Ferriss or any of these guys to start your own podcast. They're like, "No, no, no. Like you could really. It's like super simple." And so they kind of broke down like an easy. They're like, you should think about it, right? Like it's going through this like resurgence. So I looked into it, and podcasting is going through a resurgence. In fact, earlier this year they showed research saying about 57 million monthly listeners on podcasts. And that might sound like a lot, that might sound like a little, but that is about an 80, almost an 80% increase from 2013, which is about 3 years ago. Okay, so it's on the way up, right? And David, we both know there's been so many great influential people coming on, having their own shows, and we both know that the podcast arena, right? Just like YouTube, it's an arena, but the way that people are learning through podcasting is very amazing, right? Because people are listening to these types of talks or these types of conversations while usually in moments where they would have been alone, right? So if they're cleaning the house, if they're in transit, right? And so you're creating a very intimate relationship with your audience. And so honestly, I didn't know anything about podcasting. I was at the time just really getting my feet wet with all the internet marketing stuff. And I decided to interview about 3 people in my own network that had successful podcasts and that did well with their launch. And I was like, okay, how did you guys do it? Like, tell me the ins and outs, right? And so, talked to each of them for about an hour each. And then I hustled and I worked my face off for about 7 weeks. And then we launched. And it was like mid-July last summer. So July 2015, I think the first episode was like on the 14th, and then we kind of staggered it. And yeah, it was great because we knew some strategies going in to how it was going to work. And I thought podcasting was amazing because not only do I get to connect with awesome people like you, David, but we get to pick the minds of people that are way more proven, that have completed or done so much more of their lives, right? New York bestsellers, multimillionaires. We just get to pick the minds of these successful people, and it's so much different, right, than saying, hey, can I just pick your brain for 10 minutes? Or can you be my mentor? Like, can I check in with you once a month? Like, the world doesn't work like that anymore, right? And it's always about value, right? And so if you have your own brand, you have your own podcasts, you have a platform to be able to feature their work, right? And get a chance to connect with them and pick their brain, but in a way that actually makes sense for them as well, right? So podcasting has been an amazing thing, and that's really like the whole backstory of how that even got started.
Yeah, that's great, Jay. There's a couple of things that I sort of picked out there. First thing is that intimacy. You mentioned Tim Ferriss and his podcast. He does like 2-3 hour interviews, so you get intimacy with the person that he's interviewing, and he sometimes goes deep with his guests, but also you're listening to Tim Ferriss for 2 or 3 hours, like, because he does most of his podcast just in his house, so it's as if you're sitting there with one of these people that are at the top of the field, top of the business, and you're privy to the conversation essentially. And I particularly love the interview format podcast. Some people just speak by themselves and they speak into the mic. Yours is an interview format, and that's the one that I prefer because I feel that you're privy to the conversation. You're in there, and I'll be walking along. Again, we're speaking about dead time, whether it's doing housework, I'm walking to something, and I'll be laughing in the street because I'm in that conversation and I'm in the jokes and I'm laughing. I think that's such an intimate connection that I don't think you get with video. I don't think you get with a book. It's podcasts is where it's at, I think.
Yeah. Well, you just think about the psychology, right, of a lot of these things. Usually when you're watching a video, if you're scrolling through Facebook, it's like, like you're in this black hole, this news feed thing, and you're going from like, you're just checking what's cool, right? Like over here, heart over here, comment over here, quick video. If it doesn't have subtitles, you're moving on, right? So that's the psychology on Facebook. But what's the psychology on YouTube, right? Do you have the 2-3 hours, to be able to sit in front of your computer and have it playing, right? I mean, some people do. I'm not saying you can't go to Facebook and watch like hour-long tutorials and things like that. I've done that too. But podcasting, the reason it's going through research is because technology has made it so much more accessible. Right now, in your pocket, you can have access to these top influencers, and even though you don't get a chance to interact with them, they're bringing on some amazing people. You're getting some amazing conversation piece, and it's just something different rather than listening to music, right? Like, I love music. There's a time and place for everything. But it's also that long form content makes, especially if you're in transit for work, kind of makes you kind of think about how are you approaching your day, right? How are you living your life? And it's asking you some very, very difficult questions. And these are just like totally in the personal development sector and the business side. But that's why I think podcasting is so great as well, right? Because you're literally right in their ear. Like you're in their ear, and it's insane, David. How many people have reached out to me and said, Jay, this is maybe the first time we're chatting, or this is maybe, you don't know me, but I feel like we know each other so well, because I've been listening for weeks, months, almost the whole time, and it's like, holy crap, like. I've said some crappy things on there. I've had some crappy shows. I've had some not so great guests. I've had guests that disagreed with me, and I've also had some great ones too. So I was like, okay, so you're giving them that full picture, right?
Yeah. You preempted a question nicely there, talking about your experience of guests, and you've kind of had the full gauntlet, the full spectrum. But what would you say is the most valuable lesson that you've ever learned from one of your guests?
Whew. It's so funny. I've asked this question to a few people that ran monster podcasts, right? Jonathan Fields is one of them. John Nastor, who runs Hack the Entrepreneur. Um, and every single time, they all hesitated because they're like, oh my God, there's so many. And I just had that moment where I went through and it was like, there are so many moments. So I'll just go through, like, I'll just name like a few. And maybe we could, if one kind of strikes a chord with you, we can definitely talk about that. But one that kind of I always think about is Alex Icon. He came on my show. I think it was episode 51. Don't quote me on all these numbers, but so he came on my show pretty early on. I would say at the end of like my first year, not even like the end of like that calendar year, so I was probably about 6 months in, and he told me this idea of when you shift your mindset to being a creator, and that's it. Like, stop it with these labels of like entrepreneur, leader, I'm an accountant, I'm a manager. Like, forget all these labels, right? And you just think of yourself as I'm a human being, and I'm one thing. I'm a creator, and that's it. And he says everything will shift in your life once you make that shift. And I didn't understand that for a little while, but then as a person that creates content constantly for my own community and doing things like this, you realize that if you see yourself as a creator, then you have the ability to create your own life, right? You have the ability to create your day, right? You have the ability to create the content that you really want to see in the world, and if no one else is doing it, great. There's an opportunity for you to do it. So that's really how I interpret it. That was hugely influential. And then another guy who's probably not so well known. His name was Jason Connell, and we did an episode on the topic of self love. And so it's a little different, right? It's a little like more like definitely more personal development, inner work conversation than how to go viral on YouTube or how to build a 7-figure business, right? But the thing I learned about that conversation was he said something in there. He says, it's okay to admit that you're human. It's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to wake up and be not that fired up and like to kind of want to complain and be in a negative headspace. Should you do all those things? Maybe not. Maybe some of them are bad habits, right? But it's okay. And he's saying that a lot of times we hold ourselves highly accountable for we start beating ourselves up for being human, for being tired, for feeling burnt out, right? And he reminded me that, we are human. It's okay to let us forgive ourselves, to have off days, right? But the way that we do this is by building out, processes and systems so that when we have those off moments or when we're not like fully in line, right, we're able to say it's all right. It's all good. We don't need to be 20 out of 10 every single day, right? Because, when you go into this, we have this like culture right now. I don't know, how it is. I think it's around the world, but really in North America, we never celebrate anything, right? We hit the goal and we're like, good job for like 3 seconds, and sometimes not even emotional. We're like, okay, cool, right? As if it's not a big deal, as if we do not validate our own journey, right? One of my virtual coaches, Brendan Bouchard, he says we don't honor our struggle, right? And I always think back about Jason Connell, even though he's not that well known. Sometimes that actually makes for the best interviews, and actually most times, and yeah, he said it's okay to be human. So those are definitely two things that pop in my head right away. But Jarek Robbins, you mentioned Jarek, he has his like live it list. It's kind of like his own version of a bucket list. Things that you really want to love. We were talking about traveling off record. If you really love traveling and you really want exploring, then how do you incorporate that in your life, right? It's not about making, sometimes it's about making space for things, but other times it's about just building it in, building that, being a part of your whole system, right? Rather than saying, I can't wait for me to hit this level of success so that I can then go do what I really want. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So many, like I could probably look at my whole list of people and I can tell you the lesson I learned from almost each of them, and some of them obviously I apply right away, and it's made a bigger impact in my life, and then others they were impactful too, but maybe just didn't resonate or just wasn't at the right time for me.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's not always just the message, it's the timing. And from the two examples you gave, I kind of heard a similar theme of it all boils down to the human condition. When you strip away all of the titles and the labels and the external stuff, it's just coming down to what makes me human, and what makes me me, and what is the best thing for me. It's funny you mentioned Brendan Bouchard, that I'm looking across my desk right now and I've got his book The Charge, and and when you were speaking about being a creator, that's one of the 10 drives that he talks about in that book, is the drive for creative expression. And it's such a intrinsic need for us, and we're both sitting here as creative people. We create content, and I think that's that first one particularly mentioned was a very powerful one, to see yourself as a creator, not in terms of I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a podcaster, but I am the creator of my existence. Everything around me is my creation, and I think that's like a sort of like a light bulb moment there. Certainly for me, kind of hearing that as I am a creator, almost with like a capital C, almost sort of like a kind of godly sort of omnipotent kind of thing, where yes, everything in my environment is my creation. I think that's very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, even as you're talking, the word choices came to my mind, right? Another C kind of word, and it's what do you choose in your life, right? Do you choose to, what are you choosing to create? How are you choosing to spend your time, right? And you're right, and we can, that's like maybe probably a different rabbit hole for a different kind of conversation in terms of how we're able to manifest certain things in our life as creators, right? But you're absolutely right. When you think about when your mindset has shifted and you just go, I'm here to create, and I want to create the life that I want, and I want to create and help people, whatever it is that you're doing, have them have a deeper learning, have them have a deeper impact with your work. It's really powerful when you're coming from that frame, rather than you're trying to be that role. I'm trying to be a successful writer, trying to be a successful businessman, trying to be a successful whatever, right? Because all of those are just illusions. They're stories that we tell ourselves.
So let's flip the switch on that one. I asked you about what was the best lesson that you learned from personally interviewing someone, and we're kind of flipping the switch with what we're doing today. It's the podcast interviewer being interviewed. So from this split perspective, what has been the most interesting podcast episode from someone else's podcast that you've ever listened to?
Ooh, this is good. I'm gonna cheat a bit. Take a look at my own podcast list. Oh, really good one. James Altucher interviewed Robert Cialdini recently, the guy who wrote Influence. He had a new book that came out called Persuasion. Have you heard of this? Persuasion, not persuasion.
Yeah.
So PRE, and it's fascinating, right? Because one, I think Influence is one of these books that you really have to. It's like one of those books. I don't have it on my table, but I do have it. But it's one of these books that you really, really need to understand very well, especially if you. It doesn't matter if you think you're a marketer or not, but the truth is, you need to at one point or another get an idea across to somebody, right? You need to sell them on something. A parent has to sell their kids on eating vegetables, right? And selling is one thing, but being able to get your market, your message across, right? Your brand, your story, whatever that is. So Influence is an amazing book, and so I love James Altucher's all his stuff, right? And they did this interview on his new book called Persuasion, and they gave these amazing examples of certain situations that people are more like primed to do certain things. So, for example, if you ask someone out near like a flower shop, if you ask like a stranger out or something like that near a flower shop, because they're kind of close, and even though subconsciously maybe it has nothing to do with the flower shop, because they're kind of in that vicinity, right? They're more like, there's all these statistics. I haven't gotten the book, so I haven't like read it, but I did digest. It was like a 90-minute podcast, and I kind of have this way of listening to content where I put it all at like 1.5, 2x speed, depending on the speakers, the first time through, just to run through it, just to kind of like get the broad strokes. And then if it's amazing, I'll put it at normal speed and I'll listen to it all over again. So I don't know, there's something tactical, but yeah, that was amazing because Robert not only broke down, so he broke down all 6 of the elements in influence, in scarcity. How do you properly use scarcity? Consistency. How do you, properly kind of maintain a consistency with people in your messaging, right? So it was absolutely fascinating, not only from a marketer's perspective, but from a business owner and just from a communicator. If you're trying to have a more compelling story, I think that is a podcast episode that I would definitely recommend. That's just one of the ones that just I listened to kind of recently.
That's interesting. I was reading a book recently, and it's about our unconscious decision making systems. It was a kind of similar thing. The author was saying when you go into a wine shop, if there's Spanish music playing, you're like 70% more likely to buy a Spanish wine, and all these kind of things. And it's kind of linking back to us being the creator of our lives and having to realize that there's all these unconscious influences that have a very strong effect on us, and learning to kind of rise above that and to be aware of that. So I think that was interesting that you brought that up. And that links into the question that I'm about to ask is, you're a communicator, you spread a message to the world, and you speak with communicators, you're on the receiving end of communication. So what I wanted to kind of give the listeners is, with your sort of extra insight and perspective on communication, what are your 3 top tips for good communication?
So in what context? Meaning like in video, or if you're doing a seminar, if you're
interpersonally.
I mean, or just okay.
Speaking to people.
This is a great question. I love it. So before anytime I just want to say, like, anytime you hear any type of tactical advice, it's a little bit bullshit, right? Because it's kind of like the things that worked for that particular person, a good friend of mine, well, now good friend, but back then I had no idea who he was. Amir Rosic came on my show, and he said this amazing line. So I do remember I pretty much remember everyone that came on my show, and he said this thing. He's like, everyone wants to be Elon Musk. Everyone wants to be Richard Branson. He's like, stop this like bullshit of trying to be like these people, because the truth is you are not Richard Branson and you are not Elon Musk, right? And here's the beauty. they are not you either.
Mhm.
Okay, so there's only you, right? So just be you, like just be the best you. And I know it sounds like really cliche, but when you kind of frame it like that, so to answer your question tactically, what I would say would be maybe some tips in terms of better communication, and some things that I just see a lot of people faulting on. And I have never taught this to anyone. I've never really talked about this, but these are things that I always notice and just observant about. So one is eye contact, right? I mean, this goes for dating. This goes for trust. This goes for anything that you're doing, right? And are you able, are you confident enough to look at the other person in the eyes and be able to just linger there, right? So I think that sounds really simple, but a lot of people I see this is exactly what they do. They'll look really quick and then they'll look away, right? Then maybe they'll check out real quick and then they'll look away again, right? Because they're nervous, right? A little anxiety, right? You might not be as confident as you need to be, but it's okay. What you need to do is project confidence, right? And sometimes you have to do things a little bit before you're not ready, and that's just a little more of like a life thing. But so eye contact's a really big thing. So I would say second, not a lot of people pause when they speak, and when you pause, it makes people want to listen to everything that you have to say. And a really good example of this is another guy who was on my podcast, I think episode 49, Philip McKernan. Unbelievable communicator. It's truly like his gift to the world. But he pauses all the time. Like interviewing him was actually a touch hard because I didn't know when he was finished and when it was just a pause. And we didn't do video, so I was like, and he's like, and that's what I mean, Jay. I'm like, okay. I just saw Philip speak a couple days ago, but pauses, strategic pauses, right? This painting is by da 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 da. So it's all about the strategic pause, right? And that makes people really listen in and go, oh my God, did I miss it? Oh my God. And it just puts more emphasis on whatever your main point is. So eye contact, pausing. And I guess third would really be, oh, there's so many good ones. But, there's this concept called mirroring. You probably know the concept of mirroring, right? Especially when you're like networking or you're out with coffee, out on a date with someone. This even comes into play when you're answering emails, okay? And this is what I mean. Well, you have to mirror the other person, the way that they communicate. We subconsciously love people that do exactly as we do, right? You do that too? You ever meet someone, you go, oh, you take 2 sugars in your coffee too? I do that too. Now we're in like the 2 sugars club, right? Right? So now we're building a bond, right? So that's kind of like the concept. So subconsciously, how do you apply this? If the person, decides to fold their arms, maybe don't as they do it, try to do it, right? But like slowly, you're mirroring them, and now we're part of the folding arms community. Do you see what I mean? Like, so subconsciously, if you write emails and the way the person, he writes one short sentence, one really short sentence at the beginning and then 2 long ones, sometimes I'll copy that format, right? And I'll get my message and I'll frame it in the same email. Because guess what? Now he reads it and he goes, oh, this person communicates like I do, right? So all these things, like, and this is not things that, like, I know, like, I don't know, whoever's listening to this, they're like writing this down. Maybe it's like a checklist or something. These are not checklist things. Okay, communication is an art form, right? It means that you have to play with it, right? It's kind of like riding a bike. We could read books, and I could tell you, hey, step 1, maybe we got to get on there, and then step 2, make sure your helmet is tight, and step 3, make sure, I don't know. You won't understand these things until you're actually riding the bike, and you're not in those moments where you're communicating and there's that awkward silence, or you really wanted to connect with that person, but then somehow it just didn't feel right, or it didn't gel right, or that person didn't respond back to you. It doesn't come into play until those moments. But that's what I would say. Those are my 3 tactics. I would say eye contact, pausing, and then mirroring.
All very good. I liked what you said right at the beginning before you gave them, talking about the kind of fallacy of strategy and how everyone wants the Elon Musk strategy and the Richard Branson. There's plenty of people with a whole bookshelf of self-help books who have just done nothing with their lives, and it's the saying is knowledge is power, and I think it's Tony Robbins who says knowledge isn't power, the application of knowledge is power. And you kind of rounded that off nicely talking about the bike example. It's you can outline these things in a strategic kind of way, but it's all about the art, it's all about the practice, and also doing these things naturally. Like you were speaking about eye contact there. If I meet you in person at a networking event and I just stand there and stare at you because some podcaster told me that eye contact is a good strategy. There's no authenticity, there's no warmth, and that supposed strategy isn't going to work out for you. So I think
that Jay Wong guy, total bullshitter, I tell you.
So I think that was a very good point that you made in and around actually giving some good strategy as well. I really like that email one. That was an interesting one because we always think email is so impersonal, but it's still communication. You might have stripped away some of the layers, but it's still there. So yeah, I think I'll take that on myself. That was a good little tip. That's something that I've learned from this podcast. I don't know about anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? It's like I said, I think in the very beginning, it's a process of refinement. Here's the thing, I don't have all the answers, right? Not enough people say this. Everyone's like, oh, I have an answer for this. I have an answer for this. Sometimes it's okay to not know, right? Like, it's okay to say, I don't know the answer. But here's what you're going to do differently if you're trying to be a high performer or you're trying to be an entrepreneur and you're trying to do all these things, is that you are going to be the person to go and figure it out to find the answer, And it's okay. Like, I've gotten really, and this is something I constantly work on, I've tried to get good at saying things like, I don't know, if I really don't know, right? And not just trying to go into some bullshit, scheme or thing and spiel. But yeah, I mean, it's a process of refinement, right? And those are just some things that came to mind for me. If you asked me 10, I could probably find 10. You know what I mean? Yeah. But its communication is so right here in this moment. You know what I mean? This is so sacred. Right? So it's like, oh, what works? It's like, well, it depends who you're talking to. It depends what the circumstances are. Is it a video that you're going to sell something? Is it a webinar? Is it a speech? Is it, like, there's so many things, right? But I hope that was helpful for whoever's watching or listening.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to give you another tactical one, despite the lampooning that we've done of it. So, Jay, you're a relatively successful individual. You've got a good up and coming podcast. You've spoken with some very established names in the field. We were just speaking again off record about how you've been doing a bit of traveling and you've got a bit of financial freedom, a bit of time freedom, a bit of geographical freedom. What would you say are up to 5? You might have less tips or strategies that have allowed you to gain that success?
Okay. I actually really do enjoy this question. So 2 things really pop into my mind. One is I'll share with you. I've shared this before, but I remember I was sharing my kind of ideas. And I think a lot of times, especially for people that are listening to podcasts or really interested in shows like yours and shows like mine, that there's a part of them that won't take that leap of faith, right? So there was a time, right, and I always kind of think back to this where I would just be very comfortable sharing my ideas, very passionate, sharing my ideas. One day I would love to do X. I would love to speak on stages about this. I would love to create a community around this concept. I would love to have courses on these topics. I would love to one day do X, right? And everyone knows this thing. Everyone knows this thing because we've been taught to set goals and we've been taught to, think big and da-da-da-da-da. But what a lot of people don't do is they don't take action towards it, right? And so I was sharing once upon a time, I was sharing this with a few people, kind of ex-coworkers of mine, and the lady was like just kind of like sitting back a little, kind of watching me, and I'm like, putting on a bit of a show for her, right? Almost trying to ask for permission. I'm asking for validation. Do you think my ideas are good enough? Do you think that I'm worthy of these ideas? Do you think I'm deserving? That's kind of like, I didn't say these things, but this is what I'm subconsciously communicating, right? And at the end of it, she didn't say anything. She just kind of took a second, and then she like leaned in and she said, Jay, I think it's really great, like all the stuff you're doing and all the things you're thinking. But here's the thing, you don't own what you say you do. You don't own all these ideas. You say the right things, but you don't own it, meaning that I don't believe in it, right? My words are empty because of a lack of belief in myself and a lack of belief in maybe my own capabilities. And maybe that's fair. Maybe I didn't have the right skills then, but we can always, Brent Bouchard comes up again, right? He said, don't let your small business keep you small minded, right? And so it's okay to be okay to dream big, but you have to own that. If you want to make multi-million dollars, you want to, have the yachts and the girls, it's okay to say that. You just have to own it, right? You can't just say empty words, right? One of the books I really love referring to, and maybe this is just kind of like an offhand thing, Don Miguel Ruiz wrote the Four Agreements, right? The first one is your word is your bond, pretty much, right? Your word is all you've got, right? So owning it is a big thing. It's a huge psychological warfare. I get it. You don't think you're deserving enough. I get it. You beat yourselves up all the time. I get it. You're in scarcity mindset, whatever. You have to find a way to own what you say. And then once you realize you can start doing that, then it's about upping the ante, about having bigger dreams, saying it with enough conviction so that you pretty much brainwash yourself and anyone around you that actually stays long enough stays for the journey for you to be able to actually achieve that, because that's what it will take. Interviewing X amount of people so far, you could tell they all brainwash themselves in ways that so that they can wake up every day to do what they do, because guess what? It's hard. It's hard to do all the stuff that we're talking about. It's really hard to do cool shit. Okay? It's hard. It's really effing hard. I'm very honest with you. I'm super transparent. I'm literally in under 2 years of full-time doing it. And it's so hard. But I know that the journey is long. I know that the road is mega, mega long. And I try not to get caught up in everything that I've been doing, right? Because I know that we're here to build true legacies, and we're here to build, a way deeper level of impact. So owning it would be the first one. And then second one is kind of, you mentioned like I was traveling earlier, and it's kind of this mantra that I've developed while I was traveling, and it's something that I really love incorporating in my life and my emails and all this stuff. And it's 3 words. It's always choose adventure. I'll say that again. Always choose adventure. Maybe it's someday I'll make like a T-shirt about it or something. But I think a lot of times we all don't know. Going back to like we don't know the answers. It's okay not to know the answers. But if you think to yourself, sometimes when you're traveling, for people that have traveled alone, you'll really resonate with this. Is when you're traveling with someone else, it's easy because you can go, oh, what do you want to do? Right? What are your thoughts? You can be second in command. You don't need to be fully in control. Right? Oh, you want to grab a beer? Cool, let's go grab a beer. Oh, you want to go get some food? I'm not that hungry, but sure, I'll come with you to get food, right? It's okay to follow, right? When you're traveling by yourself, what's different is that you have to own every decision that you make. Do you want to go left or right? Do you want to go left or right? I guess left. So you're going left, right? But in those moments, if you remind yourself to always choose adventure, I have found that in my own life, it has never led me wrong. And it's only led me to an epic failure or an epic success, but they're all these miniature experiments. They're all these mini adventures along the way. And that's just my own way of reminding myself to kind of enjoy the journey. And while we're on it and to be grateful for, where we're at and the problems that we have and also the successes that we have.
Yeah, definitely. With both those things, I heard that word creator again you're that's clearly the running theme for this particular interview, Jay.
Yeah.
You create everything in your life. You've got to own what you do, what you say, what you think, what you feel. You are the creator, and when you go with that mindset, you can go out and achieve the things that you want to achieve. I think that's been a really important running theme through our discussion so far. Now, I want to be respectful of your time. We've been on the line for a little bit so far, so I'm just going to wind down with the last few questions. So,
Sure.
I teach a lot of personal development, so I'm always wanting to know, what are people's personal development practices and strategies? What do they do to really help themselves grow and develop?
Sure.
So, we've got one more tactical question for you, Jay, if you can stomach it. What are your 3 personal development practices that you do on a consistent basis that you think brings you the most growth and well-being in your life?
So don't get me wrong, David. It's not that I hate the tactics. Is that people fall in love with the tactics, right? I get that. Here's the thing: tactics change, right? Right this second, Facebook Live is really doing well, right? Snapchat is, you may want to be on Snapchat, right? But like a year and a half ago, it was all like Instagram, right? Before that, so they're all tactics, and tactics change. That's the thing, right? And so what does not in my opinion has a deeper impact is having the mindset of how did you get to that tactic? You know what I mean? How did you find what works for you? So don't get me wrong. I ask a lot of frameworks and tactics on my own show, and something that was shared with me by Stephenson, actually, which I thought was really interesting. I asked him, I was like, "Oh, what are the things that you do to kind of like prime you to like make you, operate at such a high level?" Right? Because he suffered from, I think it was like it ends in imperfecta, but
Osteoporosis,
and so he's in a wheelchair, right? And I was like, well, Sean, like, I'm asking him like, what are people's first impression, all these things, and he's like, how I keep myself like top of game. He's like, I have this called Win Life Works List. Win Life Works List, like you're winning life and works. And I'm like, okay, cool. I've never heard of that. I was like, what's on the Win Life Works List? He's like, 16 things. And he's like, here's the thing. I don't even do all 16 things every day. He's like, I see the list of 16 things, and I only do about 3 or 4. And I was like, oh, okay. What's on the list? Like, if you don't mind me sharing, please. I know we were just talking about tactics and mindset. He was like, honestly, it's really, really simple stuff, right? But then he says, common sense is not common practice. And I go, I get it. I totally get it. I was like, let me take. So I guessed at a few, and then he told me the whole list. And you guys could check out the whole list. It's now episode 90 on the Inner Changemaker. And really, the whole literally, it was things like drink 2 liters of water every day. Make sure to exercise for at least 30 minutes. Make sure to be in gratitude for 3 things, situations, people in your life. Make sure if someone pops into your mind, make sure to send that message and thank them. And so it was all simple things like that. And I was like, holy crap. I'm like, are you telling me like you just do these things? And he's like, no. He's like, here's the thing. Everyone makes it, 1, overcomplicated. And 2, he goes, the world is suffering from a lot of insecurities and anxiety and all the, like scarcity, all this stuff, right? And he's like, you know what the cure to all that is? I was like, what's the cure, right? Tell me. And he's like a therapist, right? And he goes, the cure is in self-care. I go, wow, okay. I wonder what we're going to talk about for the next 40 minutes because we just solved the biggest problem in the world. But okay, so just coming from there, this is like what I do, like religiously, all the time. And it doesn't mean that I do them multiple times within the week, but it doesn't mean that I do them every day. So 1 is morning pages. So morning pages is a form of journaling. You probably, another book for your audience or for yourself, Julia Cameron wrote this book called The Artist's Way. And when I was vagabonding through Asia for most of 2014, I followed this every day, like religiously. Okay, every morning, cup of coffee and morning pages. That was like the thing. I had nothing else going on, so I had some time. Um, and so what it is that you download all the bullshit that happens in your head, right? All the voices that tell you you can't do it, all the voices that tell you you can do it, right? You download every thought, good or bad, dirty, dark thoughts. You want to kill someone, whatever, right? Just write it all down, get it out of the system, right? And she recommends 3 pages. And it's called morning pages. It's not for you to share. It's not for you to take an Instagram. Okay, it's not for you to post it on your wall. It's none of that. It's for you to download the BS that's in your head so that you feel a little lighter and that you have a little more clarity so that you can tap into your zone of genius. Okay, so whenever I feel a little bit stuck or I'm like overwhelmed, I got a bit too much on my mind, I just write it all down. It could be a to-do list. It could be like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. I have 60 things to do. I'm going to write them all down. Build, this page, do this, reach out to this person. And once you start writing, all of a sudden it comes out of your mind, right? Because your mind is not a computer that is meant to store data in that way. It's not like a stored to-do list type of thing. You know what I mean? There's apps for that. Google Chrome has shit for that, right? Your mind, you need to clear the shit that's in your mind so that you can tap into your zone of genius. Okay, so that's 1. 2, I actually drink 2 to 3 liters of water every day. I get a thing. I actually have like a different water bottle, but I bought this water bottle specifically.
That's mine.
Yeah. I don't know if you do this too, but I do it. I haven't really talked about this. 1.5 liters. Great. Now, when I wake up, I chug one of these, so I know that I'm at 1.5 already, right? And all I got to do for the rest of the day, because when the rest of the day happens, we typically suck at doing things like every hour or something like that. So I know that I'm keeping hydrated and it's keeping I'm going to be in good health and feeling good. So drinking water is actually a super underrated one. Okay. I went to a Brendan Burchard on this kind of note. I went to a Brendan Burchard conference a little while ago, about a year and a bit, almost a year ago. And we were doing breathing exercises in the conference, like breathing exercises, right? Yeah. And I was like, I was a guest of a friend, so I was like, okay, I didn't pay like the full whatever it was, a couple thousand to be there. Like I paid like the one-time ticket fee, so a few hundred. It wasn't nothing, But I'm like, I can't believe we're doing breathing exercises, right? And it was High Performance Academy, and Brendan's like, he's like, breathing is underrated. We think great common sense is not common practice. Right? Your brain needs oxygen. The reason you're like sitting at the desk all day and you're feeling overwhelmed and it's 3 p.m. and you want to like stop what you're doing is because you're not getting enough water and you're not getting enough oxygen. That's what's happening, right? So on top of that, and this is something I know this is probably, I don't know if this is like what you wanted to hear, but I also have an alarm that I've set up that vibrates every hour and a half. Depends. The reason I do this is so it reminds me to get up. It reminds me to get up, and it reminds me to get water, it reminds me to stretch. And what you got to do is you got to keep your blood flow is a huge part of this. And I know these are all like, Jay, I kind of know all this stuff already, but I guarantee you nobody listening to this is doing it. I guarantee you, because all this stuff is so difficult. It sounds so easy, but it's so difficult to actually incorporate and build in and do on a consistent basis, right? Because if your brain is thinking clear, if you're able to tap into your zone of genius, if you're feeling great, and it's not about chugging 5 cups of coffee, though I'm not against that. I was just in Italy, so it's all good. So yeah, it's about being hydrated. It's about going the distance. Right? You have the audacity to make your dreams happen, to build an online business, to all these different things. You have the audacity to say, I have a message that's worthy of the world. You're going to be going the distance, my friend. It's not going to happen in 1 year. It might not happen in 5 years. It might not happen in 10 years. You're going to be going the distance as you're doing this. And you need to make sure that you're able to actually do that so that you could build the community in the right way. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but those are some of the things that I do on a daily basis to not only like personal development is great. Like I'm in a line of business where I interview great thinkers. So I like in terms of reading their books, watching videos, like I have ways of digesting their content in like probably a quarter of the time and be able to have a very high level conversation with them, you know? Um, but I really don't think people need to consume more content. I know it's kind of weird because I run a podcast and we're on a podcast, and this is definitely considered content if you're still watching this, but I really don't think people need to consume more content. People need to get off their butts and work. Like, they need to turn off everything and they need to get to work. That's what people need to do. They need to take action in their lives, right? And so if you drink water and if you morning page all the time and if you get up once an hour, I promise you, your productivity is going to jump up at least 40%.
Definitely. I think that's so key, and it's one of the principles that I like to teach with my personal development kind of practices. Is it's all about those foundations. You can't build a tower on quicksand. You need that strong bedrock for going into the day. And talking about Brendan Burchard, I was also at one of his seminars, and did he do the Qigong exercise? Yeah.
Qigong exercise, the cupping.
Yeah. So that's something that, again, I don't do it all of the time, but I work best when I'm doing that every hour, 2 hours. So I'll do a creative block of work. Then I'll have a break and I'll do the deep breathing. I'll run through the Qigong exercise. And it's just simple stuff. It's moving oxygen and blood around the body. It's getting a little bit of activity. But if you're not doing that, then you're starting to resort to the chugging 5 cups of coffee when really all you need is just the water and the oxygen. That's nature's energy. And it's the energy source that's kept us going for all of the, thousands of millions of years that humans have been on the earth, and as Brendan says, common sense is not always common practice. So I think sometimes we do need to strip down the complexity a little bit and just do the simple stuff. And I think the problem is people equate simple with not effective, not valuable. And another problem with simple is simple doesn't always mean easy. Something can be very simple. It's a very simple concept to grasp, but it's not always easy to do that over a consistent basis. But it's that consistency that gets you to where you want to go. If you want to you mentioned go in the distance, go in the journey. Every athlete, successful businessman, politician, you name it, they've had a long journey to get to where they wanted to get to. And the only thing that really seems to separate them is the consistency of their practice. There's nothing overly special about them. It's just putting in the graft day after day, day after day. So I think that's really valuable that you broke down the complexity a little bit, and you could have given me some fancy framework that you spoke to Bob Proctor about and another one from Jack Robbins. Like, you could have done that, but you just said water, oxygen, and the journaling is also a really good one. Yeah.
It's so true though, right? Like, because people everyone's always looking for the new thing, because we're addicted. Right? That's the problem. We're addicted. Every time I say, oh, here is my success blueprint, that will beef up your DNA, you're like, oh my God, your dopamine starts going crazy, right? And you're like, what, I want to download that. I want to get that program, right? And that's okay. Get it. First of all, I get it because I'm in the business, and we're both in the business of transformation, right? So we help people by educating and inspiring them, right? So I get that. But a lot of times people don't use the tools and everything that they already have, right? And they're undervaluing themselves. And that's an even bigger problem, because even if you're in my courses or what have you, those are some of the easy things that you need to be able to do, so that you can take whatever the new information is, the new tactics, and to up your game. If you don't even know the basic stuff, man, there's no, don't worry about taking an additional course or getting, the new books. Like, read the books you have right now. Have you gone through your life? You don't need to, get the new books. And in fact, YouTube is an amazing YouTube podcasting, man. If you can't do it in today's world, right, with the content that's available, that's really an issue on our own. It's an issue with us, and it's an issue of the choices we're making in our lives.
Definitely. I think that's a really strong point to kind of round off that strategy section on. So just want to round things off, Jay, and bring this great sort of discussion to an end. Do you want to tell the listeners what's the future hold for Jay? What is the next kind of big project that's coming up for you?
Amazing timing that you asked this, because the last couple months I've been really thinking. I wrote Changemaker Movement on my website in the beginning, and I'll be super honest with your audience. I didn't really know what that meant. I just wrote it there because it sounded good, and I was like, who doesn't like a good movement? But as I've developed myself as an entrepreneur and as I've developed the show, I realized that we are doing something really unique and special, and that there are a lot of people out there that are, they're doing things that they're not passionate about, and they are looking to build a legacy, whether it's for just themselves, whether it's for their family, whether it's for just their kids, right? They want to have, and it doesn't mean, when I say legacy, everyone always thinks like massive, like international speaker, traveling the world. That's not necessarily a dream for everyone. That might be your dream. That might be my dream, but that's not the dream for everyone, right? And people want to have legacies around things that they're passionate about, knowledgeable about, right? So in the next like year, you're gonna really see us develop the community around being a change maker. We're thinking, live events, right? Because the courses are great, but it's also, I find it a little unfulfilling in terms of just having those courses, right? We don't lack, we're not in a situation where we lack content. We've talked about this a couple times. We're in a situation in the world where we lack connectivity, right? Where we lacked each other and being able to look at each other in the eyes and say it's okay, right? And I'm not saying in some like crazy rah motivational like stuff, but I mean like it's okay. We are almost losing ourselves on the path of success and trying to scale up, and we're losing the soul and the message of what we want to say to people. So for me, it's about putting these live events together, retreats. I don't even know what it looks like right now, David, but I can tell you it is going down in a really big way in the next 12 months. It's happening. We're driving this movement. More and more people are emailing me, writing cards. Like, the show has had a great impact, and I think that's a great starting point, right? But I'm looking to evolve past just the podcasts or the YouTube stuff. And that doesn't mean that obviously means I'm going to be going all in and doubling down on both of those things. So, if you want to follow the adventures, definitely Jay Wong TV on YouTube. If you want to follow the podcast, an amazing hub of information there, the Inner Changemaker. But the Changemaker movement, I don't even know what it looks like right now, David, but I'm telling you, it's coming and it's going to be epic.
Awesome. You preempted my final question, Jay. I was going to ask, where can people find you on social media and the internet to stay in touch with what you're doing? You've answered a couple, but throw in any tags that you didn't get in there.
You mean you want me to like give out all my things so people could like socially stalk me, right?
Yeah, essentially.
So Instagram is a really good one for me. I love Instagram. I'm not a big Snapchatter, but so Instagram, it's my name, Jay Wong, twice. I'm sure you'll be able to link everything. YouTube, like I said, we do some whenever we travel. We'd love to do some behind the scene vlogs. We put up weekly videos, and then the podcast, like I said, Inner Changemaker, an amazing hub, and just check out the website and join the movement at theinnerchangemaker.com.
Awesome. So Jay, I just want to finish off by thanking you for spending your time with me today, and also thanking you for giving some authentic, hard answers. You weren't afraid to express your opinions and break down myths and barriers that people might have, and I really respected that. And there was a couple really useful things in there that I learned. So it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I hope the audience gets some value. And to those of you who are listening, remember to choose legacy over currency from Jay, and from me, it's a reminder to love inwardly and shine outwardly. Be speaking to you soon.